Good evening, good night. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a stat check bonus content piece. This is the Q2 or the third bit of Leviathan Militarum Field Manual reaction. We are live with myself and Pumbaa from the End of the Matrix podcast in the crossover episode of a lifetime. So I hope everybody is having a fantastic time. Thank you so much to Pumbaa for stepping in last minute. Unfortunately, Nathan is having a couple bit of internet issues, and Jeremy is feeling a little bit under the weather. So we've had to slapdash together a bonus host. So Pumbaa has graciously stepped in to help us out. So we'll be going through the data slate. We're going to go through all of the changes, what their impacts are on each of the armies as they come up, anything that we think was, over the mark, under the mark, for some factions, what was missing, all that kind of thing. We're going to be using the spreadsheet that Jeremy made, which I will be screen sharing in a little bit, and we'll be going through that. But I just need to very quickly post an announcement that we are live on the Discord so that I do not forget. And we are good to go. Once I hit send, there we go. 500 people it wanted to be. So we are going to go through the data slate. Easiest way to do that. Jeremy created, as I said, a very, very nice little bonus episode. But before we do that, Pumbaa, how do you feel about the balanced data slate? How is it looking from Poland's perspective?
That's a good question, man. Actually, I am, to be honest, quite disappointed. I think I understand where the changes are coming from. Like the general state of the game, I think is well agreed that it's been pretty good for the last at least a quarter, maybe even more than that. So I get why the changes are a bit soft, in my opinion. But especially in some places, I feel like they missed a mark somewhere. They could have done more and they've done less, which is an approach that as I've said, I quite understand. But I was hoping for a bigger shakeup, also because, this is probably the data state that WTC is going to be played on, and we are going to keep till mid-summer, at least July, right? So it's going to be a stale couple of months, in my opinion. I don't think much is going to change.
Yeah, it's definitely created a bit of a. I don't know if you've. So for anybody who watched our main show on Tuesday, we kind of went through all the factions of the game, went through sort of like generally how they're all stacking up relative to each other in terms of stats, and it definitely kind of gave a picture of a very haves and have-nots meta game where there was kind of 10 armies that are playing fairly well and doing a lot of interesting things at the tournament level, and then 10 or so armies that kind of aren't, and then a few in the middle. And for me, it feels like a few of the armies right at the bottom got a little bit of a bump up that maybe pushes them into that middle tier where they're now like, if you're really good at them, you can maybe win a tournament with them. They might be worth considering in a team perspective. There's definitely reason to include them now, and there's more of those now. But the armies at the top either kind of stayed the same or didn't really shift around to the degree that the armies that are still suffering and didn't get any changes, like the mid-tier armies aren't going to suddenly become incredibly competitive against their bad matchups at the top. So it's probably going to still leave it fairly, it's probably a little more like top and middle rather than top and pure bottom, except for a couple of factions stuck at the bottom now. So it's given a little bit of freedom for, people who are really good at their army or have a lot of confidence, and interesting team dynamics for your seventh and eighth lists might get a lot more interesting now. But those first few lists that everybody's playing, you're still going to see Necrons and Ironstorm and Blood Angels and Thousand Suns and all those kind of things. They're still going to be everywhere in exactly the same ways they are now. And in some ways, that's a good thing. It's good to see a data slate that doesn't just invalidate everybody's armies and just go, all right, all the stuff you're playing is gone now. You can still play Hypercrypt and it will still be competitive and you can still do well with it. Same with Canoptic Core. And in one of those cases, it might even still be a problem. But it's nice to see a data slate that didn't just go, oh yeah, so you were playing Chaos Space Marines, stop doing that, right? Which I think is a good thing in that sense. Whether they hit the nail exactly on the mark, debatable.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I will be saying, and it's worth mentioning, that it's going to be from the perspective of a person who plays this game way too fucking much. So for me and many of us, to be honest, in this hobby, like the less changes might be for the better, because for many people, unlike me, who don't play this game like 5 times a week or something, the meta isn't going so stale so soon, right? So the longer, like the good state of the game being kept for a longer time might actually benefit a lot of people instead of them being disappointed in that in some way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, from our perspective as well, it's kind of nice after the chaos of the last few years to theoretically be going into a fairly stable WTC where you can rely a lot more on player skill and adapting to the metagame rather than who found the broken lists fastest. So there's a lot of appeal in that as well as being a bit different from the pure chaos of a you have a month to figure this out, which was last year. So maybe there's appeal on both sides. with that said, we're going to launch into going through it. So as I said, there is a link to this spreadsheet, which I will throw again in the chat, so that anybody who wants to see it can follow along. But we will be live streaming it as well. So that should now be. There we go. So that's the link you can click. It'll be in the description, show notes, and all that as well. But we'll be following along with it on the slide. So let me present that from share screen. Uniform field manual impact and share. So here we go. We have, thank you to Jeremy again, all of the points in the game cataloged into red and green, points up, points down. For custodes and orcs, it's relevant relative to the previous Militarum field manual. So when you see changes here, it's relevant relative to where they were as they stood before the codex, not necessarily the points that were printed in the codex, except in the case of completely new units.
Yeah, which is the right way to do that, because
those
come on.
Yes,
Exactly.
Wardens, I think the bikes were 100 points, and they're not seeing play at 70. So that's a fun place for custodes to be.
Ugh.
So let's start off. Sisters of Battle. So for Sisters, we have a few points changes for Arcoflagellants, basically going up 1 point per model, 5 for the 3-man squad that you're not really seeing, puts them at 160. Celestian Sacrosancts came down 5 points to 60. Crusaders went up 10 per 2, which is actually one of the bigger point changes relative points in the game because they were so cheap as it began. Demonofuge, which is Stern and Kaganil, the Harlequins model, down 10. Death Cult Assassins went up 10, so we're seeing those small little units for Sisters going up just a little bit. -5 on Mortarfires and Penitent Engines, and then +15 on the Triumph of St. Catherine, who was disgustingly cheap for her points beforehand. So how do we think these impact Sisters? What's missing? What are we happy to see here?
So Arcoflagellants going up, kind of obvious. Still, it's been 30 Arcoflagellants in every single competitive list you have been seeing for the last half a year at this point, I think. And I honestly don't think that's going to change with these points updates, but at least you are thinking about it instead of just plopping 30 in every single list. Some of the bizarre things for me, Mortiferance and Penitent Engines coming down, those specifically. I think those were actually great before, and were also on the verge of bringing them coming, even those 5 points, and people for people to notice them, to bring them into the list. I think it's going to actually make people just focus on them and realize that they were always great units. Triumph is interesting. I think some people were actually opting out of the Triumph meta, even though the model itself is just great for the points given. And now, at least, I think there should be a reason to not bring him, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you start getting into, am I using all of the abilities from this now? If you want to be using the double miracle dice and you have a reason to do it, like you're playing Exorcists or the Battle Sister squad that's spamming at the miracle dice, if you want to play into the lethal hits, all right, you have you bring the Triumph for a purpose now a little bit more, rather than just generic ball of stats, good stuff. If the abilities line up on a turn, I'll use them. I think the main thing, yeah, as you said here, it's mostly across the list that we were seeing, you're going to see you're losing 30 points on Arcoflagellants, 20-ish points on Crusaders, 15 points on Vol. So you're going to lose about 60-ish points. And then if you're playing a lot of the stuff like Sacrosancts and the engines, then you're going to gain a couple of points there. I think one of the interesting things, hitting the things that make you a little bit more vulnerable to bring it down with stuff like Penitent Engines. If you're bringing them and Vol, suddenly your list is incredibly vulnerable to that. So it's another reason, in the against Vol column. But she's a lot more popular in singles play because of needing to have an answer for Necrons and things like that. So it does open up a new and slightly different weakness to that list, where it's already quite vulnerable to assassination if you're playing resurrecting characters and standing up Celestine and things like that. So overall, I think I'm fairly okay with sister changes. They were very good before, but they definitely always felt like they had exploitable weaknesses, even if they are very good at, drawing in a team's environment and all that kind of thing. In a general perspective, sisters have always felt like they're not fair in the sense that, they're all passing dice and stuff, but they do a fairly honest way of being an unfair army. And they've always felt like there's always a gameplay into them, right? You were never just getting straight tabled by the Triumph of St. Catherine being slightly too cheap. It was just incremental advantages that would add up over time. And if you played around it appropriately, and there's just a bit more room to play around it appropriately, they'll have, a unit less. So if you play the trading game into them, you have a better chance of winning it now. They might run out of stuff a little too quickly if they're, mismanaging resources, which gives Sisters a more exploitable. I still think they're going to be one of the best armies in the game. I don't think it's a bad place if Sisters are one of the best armies in the game, because they're not advancing, charging at you and tabling you on turn one and all that kind of thing. They're a much healthier, best army to have than something like Guard would be for me.
Agreed, absolutely. I think what it comes down to is they are dropping one mid squad. So like one Zephyrim squad, one Seraphim squad,
Yeah.
something like that is missing from the list, which is fine. They've got plenty of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But it weakens them a little bit. Not so much that they're going to be irrelevant, and that's fine. Okay, custodes. So we have Alea is down 5 points from her militarum field manual. The Blade Champion is down 10 in exchange for losing the ability to reroll advances. The Knights Ensura, which is the Sisters of Silence character, came down 10. Trajan Valoris came down 10. I would trade those 10 points for ignore modifiers on everything but hit modifiers every day of the week. Valerian came down 5, and the Venerable Contemptor Dreadnought came down 15. Overall, these points for me are a bit of a joke given the new codex. There's probably a build in there that's completely fine for one build in certain metagames, but that book is a little lacking, and I don't think these points do anything to help it on that path.
Yeah, I do think that points is wouldn't be necessarily the way to fix custodes right now. I think the book is flawed on the just rules department. I think the datasheets and the points are just fine, but the rules are cooked on the you're coming in from the wrong direction. And since they have not been doing like the data slate in this one, I don't think that points would ever fix them.
Yeah, I mean, you could make
unless you are just trying.
cheap, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could make them a horde army, but that's absolutely not the way to do it.
I mean, there will still be people out there losing. Like, there are still armies out there that lose to an ingressing custodes army.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's not like the army is completely irrelevant. There are definitely things, but there will be a lot of matchups that are out of your control because the rule set just doesn't promote you having interactive gameplay with your opponent. It has a lot of non-synergies and anti-combos that result in, you want to play a bunch of characters, so you have a bunch of free stratagems, and there's no free stratagems, and all these kind of things that just feel like they weren't designed so much as just kind of happened. That results in custodes looking a little awkward.
Yeah, what I'm gonna say is Trajan coming down because of his nerfs to his datasheets is quite obvious. What I think is missing is at least 10 points off a captain, because captains currently in Custodes Codex, compared to what has been happening with the index version, they are significantly weakened, and I think points should have reflected that.
Yeah, they lost access to they went from having 2 kata every turn, so potentially 10 bonus katas, and then 1 turn of all 3 kata, so an 11th, to once per game you get both, and one of the katas disappeared entirely. And also there are significantly fewer battle tactics across the Custodes Codex.
Yeah,
so you're going to be doing a lot of go to ground with your wardens stood in the open now, I think, which is not the place that I would want to be as a shield captain. They're still like a fairly good on-rate data sheet as far as doing stuff, but in terms of synergy with the army, they're definitely weaker than they were, and the codex is weaker than it was, which I think would reflect, a points drop there wouldn't have been too far. The Terminator captain definitely got a buff in terms of data slate, probably fine staying there, but the shield captain on jet bike and the shield captain on foot definitely didn't need to be 140 points. Right. Next up, we have Adeptus Mechanicus, who actually saw some fairly cool points changes on a bunch of the bigger things. So we had Belisarius Call come down 30 points. The Castle Robots came down 20 points per 2. Cataphrone Destroyers came down 10 points. The Onager Doomcrawler came down 10 points. Roststalkers came down 12 points, putting them at 12 points per model, which is very cheap for 2 models with a 5 with invulnerable save. Skitarii Rangers came down 10 points. The Scorpius Disintegrator came down 10 points. And the Sidonian Scatros, which is Mr. Stiltman, came down 5 points.
Overall, I actually, controversial take here, I like the fact that they didn't tackle the most obvious things that already were seeing some play in AdMech. I know a lot of people expected them to just drop the whole codex down in points. I would actually be scared about doing such a thing. I think AdMech then would have had the potential to turn into a real monster. I like them tackling some of the most egregious things. I think Castellans are at least interesting right now. Maybe 10 more points on each of the robots could have been nice, but debatable. I think there's play. And again, because they were not doing a slate, I don't think AdMech itself is fixable on just the points department necessarily.
Again, without just making them a horde army, which they already kind of are. Yeah,
exactly.
I think I'm with you on this one. All the points drops here give you a few new options for picking whichever of the damage and big thing options are most relevant for the current metagame. So there's a little bit more adaptability there. You can maybe tweak in a model, tweak in a unit here and there if you want to try out some of the new stuff. But things like breachers are still going to be your primary damage output. You might get some points back and forth if you were taking some rangers. You might consider as you said, the robots now, and that's probably going to be about it. But they have said for AdMech that in the next slate that they are trialing out some rules changes for them. So I would expect this is kind of a holding pattern, see if they get anywhere interesting. But there's probably a limit of how cheap you can make this army before it, as you said, just becomes, well, can you deal with 125 invulnerable save models? Oh, no, you can't. Also, there's breachers behind them shooting you, and there are armies that won't be able to deal with that. And it's also already creeping to the point where you're paying, $1 per point on this army.
Ugh.
And yeah, I know, right?
Horrendous.
Yeah, I think Sicarii and Ruststalkers are $60 and 60 points for 5. So, there's at some point you have to be like, we can't keep making this cheaper. We have to just change this army. So yeah, I think it's a shame. AdMech are such a cool range. Like I love all of the Leonardo da Vinci stuff. It's definitely not for everybody, but it's a shame where they're at right now. They've definitely got some interesting play. I know there's been a little bit of experimentation in like the team meta game for getting lists that have very obnoxious board control presence, but not necessarily a ton of damage output under the right circumstances. But when you can use that in a team situation, that's completely manageable. But that don't necessarily convert that into singles results outside of the very best players in the world having a ton of confidence with them, which, I think those people will maybe get a little bit. They might have a couple of different directions taking the lists and power to them. But I think for the average player, this army still stays pretty terrible, unfortunately.
I agree. I think the problem with AdMech and spoilers, Necrons that we've got coming up is actually the fact that they didn't decide to do anything about them in the previous one. Like it echoes over here because they have decided to not do a full slate. And now with just points, it feels very underwhelming for AdMech and especially AdMech players in terms of being underwhelming when they basically go from codex into an update, and then after like 9 months of play, they are actually going to be maybe fixed, which feels terrible.
A strong feeling that the alternative was nothing, and every 6 months we got an update, and the alternative was we can do points every 3, or we can do rules every 6, or we can just do points and rules every 6, and there was no alternative. It's kind of how I feel like that was coming down, and it's like, well, we can do something to try to tweak things back towards the middle a bit, and that's it, and we'll leave it there. And I think this is probably the metered middle ground of what was acceptable within the company. It's definitely how it comes across. Which, this is what we had for most of 8th edition, and it worked great then, right? So
yeah, definitely.
So moving on to Guard, another army that I think Guard are the first of the armies that got like real compensation buffs, where a bunch of stuff that was very clearly above rate came down in points. So we have Attila and Rough Riders came down 10 per 5. The Basilisk went up 15. Bulgaren came up 10 per 3. The Hellhound came down 10 per, which I think is a very interesting change. Hydras came down 10 per. Khazarkin went up 20 per 10. The Leman Russ Battle Tank, Eradicator, Executioner, Exterminator, Punisher, Vanquisher, Foe Beater, Destroyer, Crusher, Manipulator, and Destructor all came down to 10. The Leman Russ Demolisher stayed exactly the same. They have the same names as Orc Buggies. You can't tell me otherwise. The Manticore came up 10. The Militarum Tempestus Squad came down 10. And that's I believe that should be Command Squad. And the Tempestus Scions themselves came down 5. So you have a total of down 25 if you're running a full 15 brick of them. And that, I believe, is it, except for the Medusa Carriage Battery, which is one of like 2 Forge-Rolled units to see a change, which went up 15 points. So very broadly, Indirect up, Bulgaren and Khazarkin board control pieces up, bad Leman Russes and some of the other tanks, and Rough Riders down 10.
Overall, I think one of the biggest shakeups in this slate, if not the biggest, in my opinion. The overall the meta guard list that like David Gaylord, Nassim, whoever was running, went up a significant amount of points, and it's gonna be felt in the faction. I feel like the question now is Leman Rush the way? Is this going to be a thing that actually works, or is this basically we shuffle some things around to still fit enough artillery pieces to deal with everything? Because how many times can we increase the cost of manticores before people stop taking them?
One of my team was just telling me they've gone up every single slate so far.
I can believe that.
Has changed every single one, and I think it's still pretty good. Like Maybe
Absolutely.
you play the I think you're definitely inclined to go more towards like the 2 and 2 basilisks play, or 2 and 1 basilisk rather than playing 3 mechanicors now. But it's not, it's a 10-point increase, right? It's not going to kill the data sheet. Very rarely does an increase, even that small ever just completely remove a data sheet from the game. I think the interesting things here, there's probably a pretty reasonable hull span build in guard now. Things like the Hydra at 85 points for rhinos are obnoxious enough. You staple a gun to it, it's a fairly compelling platform. The Hellhound is already quite interesting with a 2-up armor save, which is definitely quite good. It has a lot of decent gun options, and then things like the Luminos battle tank at 170. There's a compelling. You talk about you put 3 Hellhounds, 3 Hydras on the board. That's 600 points.
Yep.
And that's a lot of wounds for 600 points. So
yep. With a very good save as well.
Definitely some interesting things to be doing in guard that will be, for me, a lot more compelling than just playing against Bullgren and artillery. So I don't have any strong complaints about the changes here.
I think this one might actually shake up the meta the most. The guard was definitely the army who was the most in the out of line of sight shooting that everybody needed to be worried about constantly when going to events. And I think kind of a reshuffling of the list, maybe nerfing the indirect pieces, something's going to actually change with this army in significant manner, I feel like, where it might impact the rest of the game the most out of all of the armies.
Definitely opens up. I think the main thing, like, if you were just going to play David Gaylord and Nassim's list from the previous few events and just play it as right, it's probably still completely fine. But I think the more interesting thing here is that there are a ton of other options that mean that you don't have to just play that now. You can go into 10-man Rough Rider squads that are a lot more interesting to be bringing back a reinforcement stratagem, because you get a lot more aggression, a lot more cool stuff. There's hulls that are compelling to run. Militarum Tempestus squads do a very reasonable amount of damage and encourage you in a very different route with transports and things like that, with like the Toroxes, and you might try, and now that you're running those kind of things, you might try like the Primaris Cycles in it, and it brings the list away from the same kinds of data sheets that we've all been playing, which I think opens up a lot of, well, if that's the way that Guard are going in, every other game you play against Guard is the indirect spam. Suddenly, it's, instead of being 1 in 8 games that you play at tournaments, it's 1 in 16, and then maybe you can get away with being a little more shy on, all right, I'm just not going to account for indirect, and have a decent chance of, like, quote unquote getting away with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we roll onto Eldar, who
I tried so hard.
The first slate have finally received compensation buffs to go with some fairly decently reaching nerfs. Pumbaa has been playing Eldar.
I have tried so hard to nerf Eldar into the ground, and I think I failed.
Let's start at the beginning. Fuegan went up 15 points at long last. I don't understand how that data sheet was 115 points for 9 months. Guardian Defenders came down 10. Howling Banshees came down 15 per 5. Shining Spears came down 20 per 3. So Storm Guardians came down 15, which is one of Liam VSL's favorite data sheets. So expect to see them on top tables soon.
Yep.
Striking Scorpions came down 10 per 5. Support platforms came up 10, putting them at 135, up from a starting point of 65.
Support platforms.
What
is a support platform?
Officially more than doubled in points this edition. They started at 65.
And they are still going to be played, which is insane if you think about it.
And Swooping Hawks came up 5 per 5. And finally, Shadow Spectres came up 10 per 5. But they're next on the Legends. If you've been paying attention to Orks, they're going away soon, I hope. Oh, it's going to be glorious.
Sure. Definitely going to happen.
So, as an Eldar player, Pumbaa, a long-time Eldar player, tell us all about how this changes your list.
So my list that I played last weekend went up 70 or 65 points, around that. So basically from the 20 squads I've been playing, I am losing a Hawk squad or something like that, or changing things around slightly. So I'm ending up with 19 squad. I honestly don't think that matters at all. I think especially these new iteration of MSU Eldar lists that Liam VSL is playing, that Manny has played at Alpine, I think they are still going to be absolutely amazing. What is not included in this, by the way, is the Phoenix Gem, which also went up, which I'm very glad for, because holy shit, that is obnoxious enhancement.
It's not actually in here, unfortunately. But yeah, Phoenix Gem went up. There's a couple of other enhancements in Thousand Suns and Ironstorm that went up as well that we'll shout out when we get to it.
Overall, I honestly am curious if people are going to iterate their list. I think they are. Banshees at 70 look very nice. Striking scorpions as well might turn out to be an option.
I've already seen people playing like 10 Scorpions in Karandras, and
That's
it's
what I
like
mean.
fairly good. I think it again though, I think these are the kinds of changes that make Eldar a lot more interesting to play against, which I think is a good thing, right? If they're playing some melee pressure and that kind of thing instead of just jumping at you, then there's a lot more compelling, gameplay to those Eldar lists, which
I
I think we're at the
actually
point where that's
suspect
probably okay.
Eldar are going to be a problem again. That is my hot take from this. They've got slightly nerfed, but they lose almost nothing, and now they kind of gained melee threats that are even more cheap. And cheap in Warhammer is very good.
If Uriel's role worked after the roll for initiative, let's all be glad that it doesn't until they get the until we get the Iandon data slate or
Don't
whatever.
put
The
that
Iandon
energy into the war, please.
Okay, right. Now let's talk about a faction that's definitely a problem for the other reason. Chaos Demons received no changes.
Which is bonkers. I am going to reiterate something I think I have heard from Art of War discussions. It is insane to me that they could have they've done very small tweaks, 5-point tweaks on things like penitent engines, mortifiers, Valerian, out of all of things, and they have not touched a single datasheet here.
I think somebody just forgot demons exist, and they were just like, we'll just not change them.
I don't see. I can get behind the not buffing them. I can get behind not nerfing them. I think there is an argument to be made that they are in a good spot. I personally disagree with that, but stats kind of echo that. Not doing not a single change for internal balance of this codex seems so bizarre to me when compared to
so
very small, tiny tweaks that happen throughout
there
this.
are so many completely unplayable data sheets in this codex. Now, I think this is another culprit of this army just needs rule changes. It doesn't work at top tables and works too well at bottom tables right now, or mid tables. Let's go with the mechanics are just wildly powerful if you don't have a plan to stop them. And the second you do, the army turns off and stops being compelling. And
Yes.
that's a problem. And it also has very binary matchups. Things like Bellicor with the 18-inch lone operative aura become incredibly binary based on whether your list is physically capable of dealing with that or not. And it doesn't make for interesting gameplay. I think for me personally, I think the biggest problem with demons is that all their leaders are terrible because they only go in 10-man demon squads. And if you gave them the option of going back up to like 20s, suddenly things like +1 OC and a squad of 20 play bearers from a small box governor becomes genuinely an interesting option. But because right now it's like, I'm not going to spend 80 points to buff 100 points squad of play bearers, I'll just bring a second squad of play bearers or another greater demon that can actually do something. And right now, I think that's a shame because demons are a super interesting part of the game that just don't really show up at tournaments very often outside of people who are just playing them because they enjoy playing demons. And those players deserve to be able to compete at tournaments at the same degree as everyone else.
Yeah, as I've said, I agree that demons themselves as an army is not necessarily fixable by points. I do think optics matter.
You could have tried.
Though. Exactly, optics matter. And I think for people playing demons, for people playing Chaos Knights, for people playing Imperial Knights, which is the weirdest one for me, it feels disrespectful to be just forgotten almost, right? And I like doing some small tweaks here that maybe wouldn't have even impacted the list that you're taking, but even being noticed, I think would be a step in the right direction. In just the statement was of this to some degree was fixed the internal balance of codexes. This literally didn't happen, right? I think this is kind of insane.
Yeah, that's fully agreed. Now,
and exactly the same happened. Exactly the same.
Now, I have less of a problem with Chaos Knights because I think Chaos Knights are actually fairly well balanced. I know the big Knights are a little too weak and the small Knights are a little too strong, but it seems like Games Workshop have decided that that's the healthier direction for Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights to exist in, is that they are better playing the small ones because it makes them, I want to say, more like a normal army, right? Because they're playing a bunch of stuff that has interaction points. And I think for that design scope, the Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights codexes are about where they should be in terms of power level, which I get
Not
it.
even 10 points on like Abominant or the spoiler.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think given the design ethos of make them play mostly small knights with one big one if they want it, I
Yeah,
don't think
but
this
if
army
if
needs
if
much changes
that's
in
the
that
take,
sense,
right? If
really.
multiple small knights but win big knight is fine philosophy is applied here. Why not internally balance just the big knight? You sometimes take a rampager, you are never going to see another big
I
knight.
think the thing with that though, right, is that it's not really about the points on the big knights, right? If you make the Atropos 7 point, like 20 points cheaper than the Rampager, it doesn't buy you an Armiger. So does it actually really matter once they're all within the scope of you get the same crap in the army anyway? Right? Maybe it gets you an extra enhancement. Is that going to make you take a knight with a worse rule? You're just going to play the knight with the best rule because the army is inherently just built like that. You'll bring the one that supports the big game plan you want best, whether it's cheaper or not, because you get the same number of war dogs either way.
Usually, yes, but demon allies are a part of this equation. Sometimes you might have actually decided to pick another big knight because it fits another squad of Nurglings in.
Sure.
Just to,
And I mean, like, I get that. Like, there's definitely, but I don't feel like you need to like wholesale rebalance the faction around is an abominant plus a Nurgling squad better than a Lancer, right? It feels
sure.
like you're kind of shuffling deck chairs. Like, yeah, I get it. It would have been fine, but it also the army is broadly in a fine place. Chaos demons do about as well as they should for the type of army they do, as far as I feel it. Like, they seem. I honestly don't really have a problem with this change. Like,
Hmm.
it's kind of fine. Brigands maybe could have done with being a little more expensive. That's about it. But that's just because they're easy allies. Okay, Chaos Space Marines. I have more of a problem with this army changing than I do with Chaos Demons and Chaos Knights not changing. This book is coming out like next month. Why are they getting points changes? Why are you putting resources into this instead
And
of other armies?
way more significant ones than many that we've discussed
Yeah,
previously.
so let's quickly run through them. We have Chaos Bikers down 10, Chaos Terminator Squad down 10, which is a wholesale change across the game. Basically, every Terminator Squad went down 2 to 3 points per model. Chaos Vindicator down 15, Cultist Mob down 5, Cypher down 15, Havoc's down 15, Hellbrute down 10, Demon Prince with wings and on foot both down 15, Legionnaires down 10, Mauler Fiend down 15, Possessed down 10, Raptors down 5, Venom Crawler down 10, and Core Berserkers down 10, which so a lot of these are just kind of this thing changed in most codexes. Like most Dreadnought, most Hellbrutes all Hellbrutes came down 10. It looks like most Vindicators came down
Vindicators.
15,
Mhm.
etc., etc. But there are a bunch of changes in here that just like, did they really need to happen? Like this book's coming out soon.
I honestly don't know what to say. I think that the army is now very interesting. I think the MSU builds have gained insane amount. You could save so many points by bringing like legionnaires and bikers and vindicators and venom crawlers, and they are generally good units. With let us not forget the what are they called? Dark pacts, I think, right?
Yeah, Dark Pacts.
It's still a cracked rule, kind of. um, so I think there are definitely builds here, but it is bewildering, as you've said, that this is so much resources that must have went into that instead of anything else when the book is basically next in line.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's a build here. We've seen some stuff which is like 2 or 3 squads of bikers backing Abaddon, Hellbrute, and then 3 of the shooting pieces of your choice with some legionnaires, whether that's Forge Fiends or Predator and Destructors, or it's the newly point buff Vindicator, or even Venom Crawlers now. They're 12 shot. They're for some reason they had that thing where how everybody's gun got combined from 2 guns into 1 gun and gained twin
Mhm.
linked. Yeah, no, they're split into 2 guns and they gained 6 shots this edition.
Yep.
Very strange decision making. Um, yeah, I think there's a ton of mileage in CSM. I think you're going to have a great month if you want to play Legionnaire spam with Abaddon and Halbrute, and fair enough. I think this is what most armies deserved, was a new build that wasn't the toxic thing that they got nerfed for.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I think
like
if
this is
you are a
perfect
CSM
build.
player, this last couple of months for with your alt index is going to be wonderful. Like legitimately, I think you've gained a lot of play.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is one of the best sets of changes, which is why it's so confusing.
Mhm.
Okay, Death Guard. The Halbrute came down 10 points.
Don't take him. He's ass. Other than that, the army is going to just revolve around the same things. I think that are in a very nice place. To be honest, I don't think they've needed any changes, especially now that the meta is going to revolve around them and they can kind of tech into multiple things if they want to. I don't have a problem with nothing changing. I think some things could have used rebalancing internally. Say the Blightlord Terminators are a joke. At least, as
fact
we've
that he
established,
didn't go down,
everything
but
exactly
everyone
every
else
single Terminator in the game went down 10 points. Couldn't have they done the same? Like
look,
nobody can bring them. They are
they were like
realistically
death.
dead.
People were playing Death Shroud, right? And then they just
Yeah,
forgot there wasn't another Terminator squad.
like Deathshot went down in the last points updates as well, like by 5, but still they did, and the Blighters just never did, and they will never, I guess, went down. Yeah, internal balance could have used some help. Other than that, no complaints. I think as a Death Guard player, you are going to spend the next couple of months, or even 3 months,
Just
or
focus
maybe
on this
more.
data sheet and don't worry about the other ones.
Yeah,
You'll be fine.
exactly. And just tech into what you want to deal with and what's going to develop as the new meta with orcs and stuff.
Yep. Okay, next we have another faction with no changes, Drukhari. I have a weird relationship with the new Drukhari rules because they're wildly cool and very interesting, and I have just not seen anybody doing like playing them and doing well that doesn't just immediately like face plant into Canoptic Court. And I think they have they're kind of in the same boat with some of the other rules where they're just a very binary, they either beat you or they don't, and there's not a lot else to it.
I think the meta that they came into was extremely hostile to them, and I honestly think this is going to change. The change in guard, especially the change in custodes, might make them good enough. I actually think, like, again, internal balance aside, because I think some of these things over here are absolutely unplayable and could have used some tweaks. But other than that, I am happy with Drukhari staying exactly as they are, because I do think that in the upcoming meta, they might have way more play than they did in the previous one.
Yeah, I mean things like scourges and like the incubi and even covalites and venoms are like they're reasonably fine. The Kronos still staples and holds the army together and
Hmm.
gives it a mechanic, which I think is an interesting design choice to have a Kronos be the linchpin of the army. Um, most important data sheet in
Yeah,
the
of
game,
course.
MVP. But yeah, I think, and then you have stuff like Lilith Hesprax is genuinely really interesting. Mandrake's just got new plastic models and are very good and will be much easier to access and play for
Yeah,
people.
the
Like,
Beastmaster is a correct data
yeah,
sheet still.
Beastmaster
I agree.
data sheet is fantastic. The scout on
It's
that
insane.
ability that moves like 12 inches and charges your turn one is great. They put you in beast jail. We have too many jails in the game now. I think
Exactly.
it's become too easy a word, but you get put in beast jail and it kind of sucks. So
I am happy with them staying as they are. I think Drukhari players should really be testing extensively into the new meta, because I think it's going to be way better for them. That's the assumption I have
as
right
long as
now,
you just never play court, yep.
which is a problem, of course.
But we'll get to
But
as we go.
exactly.
Okay.
But genuinely, I think some of the armies that have heard this Drukhari build have gone down.
Okay. Next up, we have Genestealer cults. We have Aberrants down 5 per 5, Achilles Ridgerunners down 10 per, Goliath Rock Grinders down 25, and Goliath Trucks down 20.
Ines, what do you think about?
I
Please tell me you
genuinely
now will be running 20 aberrants after this
quite
change.
like I genuinely quite like these changes. I don't know if I'm quite ready to commit to 20 Aberrants. That there's still 400 points for a reasonable squad, and that's a lot for a unit that has a 5 up armor save and doesn't have an invulnerable save. Yes, they have a 4 up feel no pain, but they still take a lot of damage very quickly. Plus, with the changes to the mechanics for bringing models back, where they only come back on a 5 up now or a 4 up on earlier turns, they're definitely a lot more fragile and vulnerable to things. But the new options with trucks and the Achilles Ridge coming down 10, where it was basically already an auto include, does give you genuinely some interesting new directions. The biggest problem I have with the Goliath Rock Grinder and the Goliath Truck is that they don't synergize super well with the detachment mechanics for Ascension Day, where they have like the Saint hits. They don't synergize super well with the army rule of bringing models back, and none of the stratagems really help them. But Rock Grinders are pretty good on rate. They're going to do 3 mortal wounds on average, plus a few on the charge with tank shock if you want it. They have natural sustained hits, so they're not supported by coming in, and they, are a thing that's reasonably resilient, can stand on an objective, and maybe survive. And if you've played Genestealer cults recently, you'll know that that's not a thing that you can take lightly. Genestealer cults are not amazing at standing on primary. It is definitely a thing that they can struggle with. And then, the Ridge Runner coming down is just free real estate. You will be able to fit in an extra enhancement if you're playing 2 or 3 of them. There is maybe an argument for playing 3, 4, 5 of them now. With the mining laser for 150 points coming in, it's 2d3 plus blast twice shots with las cannons that hit on 3s that could potentially have ignore cover and +1 AP from another rock grinder or coming in from reserve with sustained hits. Like, it's genuinely good output. And they're just cheap backfield units now. Like, it's a lot of points for the wound. A lot of wounds for the points. And then, Aberrants definitely benefit from the Goliath truck change. I think there's an argument that, like, a squad in a truck is fairly interesting. The Abominant gives you sustained hits naturally, so you're not super worried about coming in from reserve. And then that unit is able to be delivered now and get in your opponent's face. You play, like, one in a truck, one with Inscrutable Cunning for infiltrate. You can apply a lot of pressure to people. So maybe there's a world where, Muscle Beach is back, and I'm excited to live in a world where someone else tests that for me and I bandwagon onto it afterwards. As I will not be the first person to put Aberrants on the table. It just can't be me. Because I spent too much time shit talking in this edition.
Amen.
Yeah, I think Genestealer cults are one of those armies that is on a knife's edge of when it is good, it is often too good, and kind of needs to be kept in the doldrums a little bit for game health reasons. Because it turns out, as we've learned from Hypercrypt and Grey Knights, that when armies that teleport all about the place are too powerful, they're frequently far too powerful because the mechanics tumble down on player skill and mistakes. And Genestealer cults are in that boat as well. They have resurrection mechanics out the wazoo. They have natural ones, they have ones on datasheet, they have the army-wide one, and you have just so many abilities. And they punish mistakes very heavily. 3-inch deep strike, 9-inch deep striking, infinite recursion, picking units up is just very powerful. And I think this does a good job of hitting all the things that were like circular and non-problematic without making the army like not feel like it's getting changes, right? That's the nice thing. Like, there are changes here that open up builds and give you direction, and they'll be fantastic once we get any detachment that's interesting. But until then, these will be fine for Ascension Day. I have no real problem for Genestealer cults. I think these are completely fine.
I've got legitimately nothing to ask. GSC is just a box that Myson sits in, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I can play that." No, it sucks, and I'm like, "Cool.
That's fair.
I will deal with it when you actually figure something out."
As Sebastian says in chat, the GSC Codex is coming after CSM, but given the GW release schedule, that could be as late as September. So we'll see if
currently we are between receiving 0 codices for 4 months and then just being dumped 3 in our face in a span of 2 weeks. So
thankfully, it's only really 2 because we don't have to learn one of them. But
yay! But one of them has like the fucking girth of 3 other codexes. So hey,
if you just pretend custodes don't exist, you won't even notice. Okay.
Amen.
Next up, we have Grey Knights. So here we have again fairly compensation buffy. A little bit of nerf, a little bit of buff. Librarians went up 10 points after going up 10 points last data slate. The Tech Marine came up 10 points, and the Nemesis Dreadnought came up 10 points. And then in return, all of the generic power armor units with Interceptor squads, Purgation squads, Purifier squads, and Strike squads all came down 5 per 5, putting them basically where they were if you were playing like 6 or 7 squads of infantry and 3 Dreadknights. And if you were playing 6 Dreadknights and 2 or 3 squads of infantry, you're going to go up about 40 points.
Yeah. So I think Nemesis Dreadknights should have gone at least 15, in my opinion. I think they are fine. I like that they are strong. I don't like them being so cheap, because for those abilities and that amount of firepower that they now can deliver, I actually think that they are quite insane in terms of external balance, especially when you compare them to other comparable data sheets. And I would love to see some of the power armors going down more than 5. 5 or 4 or 5.
Nemesis Dreadnought to a Redemptor Dreadnought gives me like nightmares.
Exactly. I would also like to see, as I've said, maybe 10 points on strikes, 10 points on interceptors, a little bit more than 1 point per model is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would have liked to see all the points. Like, I would have liked to see like another 5 points off of all these units and another 10 points off of everything that went up.
Because currently,
kind of where I'm at.
currently this is very, very. I lost 40 points from my list, so I'm probably cutting a squad of henchmen, swapping an assassin around, or one librarian becomes a tech marines or something. It's very
Exactly. I'm only fitting
Existing.
Sigil, not Inescapable Wrath kind of thing.
Yeah, like
right.
Okay, I'm swapping a little small thing for another small thing, or just the most like insubstantial change you can make to a list, and it still works very much the same.
Yep, it's enough to give them this is a slap on the wrist. Grey Knights, I think, are based on everything. This is the kind of play pattern Games Workshop intended for Grey Knights, and I generally like that Nemesis Dread Knights at least theoretically want to play on board, which does make them a little less slippery than the rest of the army. The Librarian is still a ridiculous mechanic just in general, but that's not changing anytime soon, so fine, whatever. Play around it better, I guess. Just deal with the 2d3 mortal wounds that are almost guaranteed, but will sometimes result in your opponent crying for a bit in a corner.
Or you,
very,
yeah,
very,
exactly.
very interesting
Unlucky.
mechanic. Yeah. Skill issue. Why did you fail the 1 in 18? Why didn't you just roll better and not kill yourself?
Aye.
Okay, Imperial Knights, no changes. I think for the same reasons we spoke about Chaos Knights, we're just going to move on from this one. This is stupid from an external balance perspective. From an internal balance perspective, I think this is just what Imperial Knights are meant to be. You could definitely give them back Bondsman on Big Knights. It would impact the army almost not at all. And I think it would be a good thing that would make Imperial Knights players have more fun and be able to play their bigger models and have a better time with them. So you should probably do that. Also, give them like an enhancement that makes one small knight a character so that this army doesn't have to play a big knight or allies.
Yeah.
Like if you don't want to make them all, just like let them buy an enhancement for a dude. Come on.
Okay. What I'm actually the most mad about here, and I think it's worth mentioning right now, is that things like Kalad's Assassin and Henchman went up, which is a nerf to the knights. Straight up. And I hate the fact that you cannot realistically find those 10 points in like changes over here. 5 points from two knights, maybe one big knight. Anything that makes you not open your app and go, well, I'm 2010 points now, and I'm fucked as a knight player. Like anything,
that's
please.
True.
That's just the worst thing you can have as a knight player, I think. It really, really fucking sucks that there's not a single change here that makes you not just. If nothing happens, that's fine. But currently, they got basically nerfed with no way of quickly changing back their list to what they have been running. So they got stealth nerf with no like upside, and they are the most struggling army in terms of the armies that haven't been touched in this points updates.
Yep.
Fucking rough.
It's a rough time to be an Imperial Knights player. I will give you that.
Legitimately rough.
For external balance, I'm always a little bit happy with that. But yeah, I think you could have probably done like everything here goes down 10 to 15 points, and Canis Rex goes up 10.
Exactly.
And put all of these guys down 20, this guy up 10, and then you're like, all right, cool, make a decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Rather than just
because especially now that, as you've said, you need to run at least one big knight, right? You've got no choice.
Yep.
In this matter.
Yeah, and as Existence says, big knights are fundamentally overcosted, but I think in terms of external balance, they probably should be. Like, that is not a data sheet that should be spammable and being seen on every tournament table. You know, this shouldn't have to go into an event expecting to play 3 rounds against big knights. Like, that's just not really like the scope of the rest of the game, and it makes it difficult to make take all comers armies when knights are good.
Look, I'm with Vic VJ over here saying knights should have never been a thing in regular 40k, but they are. And
we can't.
We cannot change it, and it's on GW to fix it and to actually make knights player not miserable. So
knights should be in the agent's book with with Kalad's Assassin.
Look, you've made the codex, you've made the index, you have the line. Fucking deal with it and make it playable.
To the players to at least make them an interesting army, even if they're not good. Okay, Leagues of Votan. Hearthkin Warriors down 10. Uther the Destined down 10. No other changes.
I am not mad about that because with so little and so few data sheets, rather, I have seen almost all of these played.
Mhm.
at some point in this edition.
Yeah, I think
So it's
Votan
hard
are
to me.
genuinely
It's
like
hard to me argue that the internal balance of the book is whack. So
yeah,
I
there's
think
definitely a
it's
few
fine.
data sheets that are a little better than others, but that mostly for me ties back to the fact that they're data sheets that have mobility. With the fact that it's usually like you'll see Terminators, Pioneers, and Sagittars in almost every list because they're the fast units, and fast is good. And you
Mhm.
would have to make the other things a lot cheaper to push them out of lists. And they're at the point where they're compelling enough to be worth taking over some of them, but not all of them. Right? We're seeing a lot of 3 or 4 Sagittars rather than 5 and 6 Sagittars now, and that's probably fine because they don't have a ton of options. None of them should be crowded out of each other.
Mhm.
And I think Votan are a little bit like meta doldrums at the moment, where the things that are good right now happen to be like not specifically vulnerable to Votan's like specific way of playing, which is like ingress and scout move style. But the meta is pretty cyclical, and they were really good for like a couple months before that. It's just a little bit down, but they're not even like that bad. So yeah, I think this is you get like 20 to 30 free points in basically every Votan list. You might consider Uthar now a little bit more, and they seem fine.
Yeah, I have no complaints in terms of Ocean. The fact that they are not a top army right now is a more matter of meta and their limited design space and options that they can bring, rather than them being, I don't know, unbalanced or anything being wrong with the internal balance
Yeah.
of the book.
Some armies have to be in the middle tier. Votan are one of them at the moment.
Yeah. Oh my.
Necrons. So we have
Oh.
a lot of changes,
Oh.
and also another compensation changes army for some reason. Now, it's worth noting this is the first time Necrons have changed since their book came out, other than exactly the update that removed the devastating wound strategy from Canoptic Core. Effectively removed. We have the Shard of the Nightbringer up 40 points, the Shard of the Void Dragon up 20 points, the Catacomb Command Barge down 20, the Chronomancer up 15, Death March down 5, Flayed Ones down 10, Illuminor Seras up 15, Immortals up 5, the Monolith up 25, Ophidian Destroyers down 10, the Plasmancer down 10, up 10, the Scorpic Destroyers down 10, the Scorpic Lord down 20, the Technomancer up 25, Trazing the Infinite up 10, and I believe the other thing is Dimensional Sanctum, the enhancement for Canoptic Core that gives Infiltrate went up 10 points. I believe it might have been.
Not sure, but didn't the enhancement that makes Hypercrypt pick up 4 units? I think it also went up.
Dimensional
Maybe
Void.
only that one?
Oh, that went up 25 points. Dimensional Sanctum went up. Was Dimensional Sanctum 10 points before, or was that always 20?
I have no clue because I
Absolutely no
haven't.
idea. Well, Dimensional Sanctum is now 20 points, and Dimensional Overseer is now 25. I don't know if one of those is a change. I don't know which one. Apologies, Garrett. Apologies, Necron players. I refuse to understand your rules despite having played your army. So let's start with the positive here. I like almost all of the compensation buffs except possibly flayed ones. None of these data sheets we're seeing almost any play except a little bit flayed ones, and they
Death
genuinely
marks
open
are
up
kind of outrageous as well.
death marks. Yeah, I mean I've only seen them a little bit, and I think Hypercrypt lost enough other places that giving them a small buff isn't actually that big a deal. Because I think Hypercrypt got hit pretty hard with everything else. That I'm
Sure.
okay giving them like a bone with a good deep striking unit, because it was kind of weird that they didn't really have a natural deep striking unit that was like reasonably good before. Um,
Sure.
this opens up some interesting things for the Destroyer detachment and for Awakened Dynasty with Ophidians, Scorpex, and Scorpic Destroyer lords, all coming down a little bit, and Catacomb Commander as well. There is now genuinely an interesting list in Awakened Dynasty, giving plus one to hit to them.
Mm-hmm.
The detachment that gives them all, like the reroll charges and things like that, is quite interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I like almost all of the nerfs. I think everything that got hit went up about what I expected it to. The only thing I
I
don't like
disagree on some of
is
those.
I think there are ones that you could like I could nitpick like 5 to 10 points here and there, but broadly, except for the fact that the Doomstalker and Wraiths didn't get hit, every single change I'm like broadly okay with.
I think
Like there was argument
Sheras
on
is the
scope.
biggest one for me specifically. I think that actually is cracked and it's
Mhm.
not fair. It's not fun to play against, especially. Um, I hate the fact that all of the Catan are still not the same points. There is no fucking reason for them to be different points by 5 at this. Like, come on,
Yeah, so the
what the fuck?
Transcendent is is 5 points cheaper than the Void Dragon, who is 5 points cheaper than the Nightbringer, and then the Deceiver is
Why?
25 points cheaper than the Transcendent.
Come
Or it's 20
on.
points cheaper than Transcendent. So you can run a Deceiver, or you can spend 20 points to upgrade him. So it's like war gear choices, right? You can spend 20 points to upgrade the Deceiver to playable. You can spend 5 points to upgrade.
All we needed to have working back, to have 3 fucking Catan, all of them still broken, all of them still very good.
Yeah, you
and
just
none of
build
them
your list, you
playable.
see what it ends at, and you're like, right, which Catan can I fit? That's how you build lists now. It's Necrons. Cool.
And the Deceiver is 265 still, which is
Yeah.
kind of insane, by the way.
The Deceiver's always been kind of fine, but just overshadowed by the fact that the Nightbringer was cheaper than him. And I think we'll probably see the Deceiver showing up a bit now. And I think that's kind of cool because he's got interesting mechanics. Like, he's stealth, so he's actually the hardest one to kill. And he has OC6 instead of OC4, and he does no damage. And so it's fine. Right. Why did Wraiths and Doomstalkers not go up? That's
crazy.
I could see the argument for Doomstalkers. They are not in every court build. They are not in every list. They are terrible outside of court. But
I
realistically,
absolutely
they're
do not
so
care.
absurd in court that I don't understand how on earth you don't hit it. And Wraiths, I get that you hit the Technomancer and it went up 25 points, and that's cool, I guess. But 25 points on the squad? Yeah, it's not enough. It's a kick in the shin, right? This army,
it's the lightest slap of the on the wrists after Eldar.
Like, yeah, this went up. The Canoptic Court lists went up about as much as Guard did, while being significantly stronger.
Yes, exactly, precisely, and them being significant, even more. I could argue they are less fun to play against than even Guard was. Okay, so yeah, the take that I like. I also like the fact that the Awakened Dynasty got a lot of buffs over here. Do you see a world where the split between detachments in top lists changes now?
Yeah, I think we might see it be a split between Awakened Dynasty and Canoptic Court instead of Hypercrypt and Canoptic Court, or a split between the three of them with more Canoptic Court, like 40, 30, 30. I could see that.
Okay. I don't.
That's fair.
But that's fair.
I think there were a lot of people who were excited to play a more melee-focused version of the army, and that
yeah, I think that's going to last 3 weeks, maybe. maybe like 5 weeks tops, okay. Right?
At WGC,
2 big events.
No differences. At WGC, we will see less diversity because no one will play core. Well, no one will play crypt anymore.
Like, I am disappointed in those changes.
Yeah, nobody's going to be playing 3 monoliths anymore.
I think the move definitely was at least to make 18 Wraiths not playable. At least
make 18 Wraiths not fit in 2,000 points.
Exactly. Just I don't know. Do something about that. Just fucking limit them to 2 squads. I don't care. It's so anti-fun and not difficult to play, non-interactive. I hate that. I hate the fact that 18 Wraiths is still just
if it helps.
It really could have died.
The most problematic version of that points and wound profile, approximately, because we might have a new one. So maybe, okay. You know how there's that the old nursery rhyme. This might just be an English thing or a British thing of, like, there was an old woman who swallowed a fly, and to get the fly out, she swallows a spider, and to get the spider out, she swallows a bird, and to get the bird out, she swallows a cat. All right. Maybe Orks will fix Necrons.
Sure. Definitely a good way to balance the game. 100% the arms race of Doom.
And then the new Chaos Space Marine Codex will fix Orks.
Exactly.
And then the new GSC Codex will fix Chaos Space Marine.
Yeah, I think that was called 8th edition, or 7th rather, even more.
Or 9th, like,
honestly. Or basically every single edition that was absolutely fucked, that basically what happened. Yep. Checks out. That's definitely the good way to do that.
Maybe we'll move on to the next one. So, yeah. Orks, this is again relative to the previous points. So there are a few ones in here that will make you go like, what? But it's mostly because of things that happened between the Codex and the Duke. So the Beast Boss on foot, which is the regular guide, came down 20, which seems reasonable. The Beast Boss,
I think that's back in line with the initial
back in
points
line with
in
like the
index.
regular war boss, I think.
Exactly. But also,
Um,
I think he started on 80 or maybe 90 in the index.
That's weird. I wouldn't have imagined
I
that was a data sheet that would have gotten nerfed, but fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
I think that guy
He
is
definitely did.
fine. The Beast Boss and Sword came down 35 points, but also Hots saw a pretty significant role change, lost 2
Mhm.
toughness, a point of feel no pain, and became a leader instead of a solo character. So I think that makes sense. The Big Mech and Mega Armor came up 15 points. The Flash Kits came down 15, which I think is reasonable given the fact that Badrock was removed from the game, who makes them significantly
Salute.
worse.
So the
Mech Guns
captain.
came down 5. Mozrog's Scragbad came down 30 for the same reason as the Beast Boss and Squigosaur. Knobs came down 5, which I think is just reverting an earlier points nerf to them because they did go up previously. The
That's
Shrugtrap
bizarre.
Dragster went up 5 points. Squig Boys went up 25 points, but gained a model per squad. So they went from being 40 points, like slightly more than 40 points a model, to being 40 points a model with an extra model in the squad. I think this seems broadly fine.
Mhm.
And that's it. And then obviously we saw all of the Legends data sheets disappear into the ether. So no more, Grot Tanks and Squigoths, just the Gargantuan Squigoth.
Can we address the elephant in the room?
Why
straight
are
up.
Meganobs 30 points?
What the fuck is going on here? I remember a week ago, I was spitting ideas with the boys driving to an event and being like, all right, so what's the price point when Meganobs become absolutely insane? And I was like, at 40, they are quite expensive, so that might be fine. At 35, I think they are borderline busted. I couldn't have imagined they stay the same. A legitimate. If you said to me that they are going to be 30 straight up, out of the box, same points, I would have fucking laughed you out of the room.
Yep. I will say, and this is not to defend Orcs, I have played into Bully Boys a few times since the book and the new points changes, and they genuinely do hit significantly less than they did in Wartribe in the index, and that is technically helpful in dealing with them. They do not kill the same degree of stuff. They are not as good at split attacking. They are a little bit vulnerable to a low roll on dice on the hit roll, especially, and because they have a very low margin of attacks. They're also kind of terrible outside of WA. However, with Bully Boys giving you 2 turns of WA and playing like not an idiot, it's very capable to use them to control board presence and not really rely on the damage output, but just to have wall of stuff while you're doing damage with other units and doing a bit of damage with them and not relying on them as a main damage dealer. And they're obnoxious as all hell to kill. They are 2 turns of Custodes Wardens, where Wardens had 1 phase. And yeah, they don't have the invulnerable save. They're not -1 to wound. They are technically in that 1 phase a little less durable than Custodes were. However, they get it for the next one as well, and the fight phase, and their fight phase, and on Overwatch. And it adds up to just being too much for some armies to deal with. I should probably activate a Terrier army into a squad of Meganobs stood in the open for 2 turns, and if they're not battle shocked, I'm not sure I'd kill them with a Terrier army under a lot of circumstances.
Yep. I don't even care how good Orks are. I think they might actually not be the terror that everybody is kind of expecting them to be. I hate the fact that this exists now. I hate the fact that with between Catan and the Wraiths and Wardens, everything is slowly like kind of getting nerfed, and then another line in the meta appears. You must be this tall to win something. And now this line has moved to being you must be this tall to deal with fucking 18 mega nubs. Because
Hey,
they
it's
might
gonna
not
be
just
it's
straight
gonna
up
be
win the game.
16, Pumbaa. Come on, only 5 in a warboss fit in a truck.
Yeah, sure.
You've already
sure.
effectively killed 2 of them in your head now.
Awesome. Like I legitimately don't even care if that's the best build that Orks can produce. I don't care if it's absolutely busted or not. I hate the fact that you now must. This is another stat check that's very abusable in the meta that some armies will fundamentally struggle to deal with, and it's going to, again, as you've discussed previously, generate the meta of have and have nots. Some armies are fucked because this datasheet exists at 30 points right now. Yep. I hate that.
I think army-wide, Anthony said it pretty well on a recent podcast. There is almost no reason for a data sheet 4 plus field of pain to exist. Like
I completely agree with that.
I think almost all of them should be 5-ups, and most 5-ups should be 6-ups, and that should be it.
Yeah.
Like the conditional ones where it's like against psychic attacks get a 3-up, against mortal wounds get a 4-up for like the Norn, like a 300-point model. That's probably pretty reasonable. The second you're putting it on squads that you can run 3 of, you're just like, well, this is now my army. Is this? Can you kill, my army twice? Is the question that it's asking, and I don't think that's particularly compelling, especially when it has such a limited cost of do the thing you were going to do anyway.
I hate that we are doing this shit all over again because it's been Tyranid Warriors, it's been Wraiths, it's been Catan, it's been Wardens. It's always something. And it kind of is like you have said yourself about Knights not being good and that being good for the meta. This is for the same reason. Some armies cannot deal with Knights, and this is why Knights cannot be good. If that's the approach that they are taking, they are fucking up big time with such data sheets and consistently giving us more to worry about in terms of stat checks, bullshit that you need to deal with to have a shot at winning the game.
Yeah. I think it's also so hilarious that this is that like the sheer defensive stat check armies are existing at the same time that the other best lists in the game are like kill you straight dead with raw damage, Thousand Sons of Blood Angels, and you never interact with me, Eldar. Just 3 completely wildly different problems to solve, and you're just like, yeah, man, good luck with your 7 Votan data sheets figuring out how to beat this meta.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rough. Other than that, in terms of points for Orks, I've got no complaints. But this one's a big one.
The only one that I'm worried about is that, and I think we might have an argument. We might be having a talk in like a couple days, in a couple weeks time, about why boys are cheaper than gargoyles. But we'll save that one for once we've seen Green Tide on the table a little bit more, because that list could be
gargoyles are a difficult data sheet to compare them to. Actually, because
they aren't actually after the new change with the Green Tide detachment. You give Orcs a flat 6 blood surge and bring in models back, they feel a lot like gargoyles.
They don't fly and they don't fire and fade. You're right. They are not on 32 millimeters. I think
they are actually, but
they are actually. Yeah.
True. Oh no, they are the same points now. Boys and gargoyles are the same points because gargoyles went up to 85. That's incredible.
Boys, what we are saying is boys are basically gargoyles. Yes.
Boys are basically gargoyles. Yeah, that's 100%.
Just play gargoyles in your Green Tide. It's gonna be fine.
Look, if I could play 120 boys in my invasion fleet, I would. So
you would never finish the game. By the way, you would die moving that army around.
All right, let's move on to Space Marines. There is a lot to cover here, but also not a ton. Assault Nurses with jump packs came down 5, which I think is one of the strangest changes of this entire display. Gladiator Lancer, Reaper, Valiant, and Black Templar's Impulsor, all in the form of the Black Templar variant, went up 5 points, making it cost 5 additional points to put a metal gun on a Gladiator chassis, but not a Repulsor chassis. The Brutalis Dreadnought came down 15. Chief Librarian Mephiston came down 10 points, making him still 20 points more expensive than a captain. The Crusader Squad in the 5-man variant, which is the Black Templars infantry guys for Firstborn, went up 10 points. The Death Company Dreadnought came down 20. Death Company Intercessors came down 10, making them actually kind of interesting. Death Company Marines on Death Company Marines with jump packs both went up 10 per 5. Deathwing Knights came down 20 per 5. Deathwing Terminators came down 10 per 5. I'm now paying 5 points for that plasma cannon option. Eliminators went up 10, making them now the most expensive warrior option in the game. The Hellblaster Squad came down 10. Incursors went down 5. Inner Circle Companions came down 15, now making them the same points as Bulgren.
And the same points as Blade Guard veterans?
And the same points as a Mega Knob.
Oh my god! Fucking kill me. Why did you say that? What the
Lamarty's came down, went up 10 points. Lionel Johnson came down 15, making him the same points as 10 Mega Knobs.
50? Yeah.
50, yep. And for the Primaris Sword Brethren came up 10 points, also making them the same points as a Mega Knob. Sanguinary Guard came down 20, leaving them a point more expensive than a Mega Knob. The Sanguinary Priest went up 10 points.
Is this the benchmark right now? Is this the world we are living in?
Yes. The Storm Raven Gunship went up 20 points. Tactical Squads came down 20, which I actually think is kind of interesting. The Terminator Assault Squad and Terminator Squad both came down 10. The Vindicator came down 15. Wolf Guard Terminator came down 10. And the Wolf Scouts came down 10. That is a lot of changes to say no changes.
Right. The things I hate the most: the 5-point increase on the gladiator chassis on the Black Templars.
Templars,
5
yep.
points.
Yeah, we know this is a problem, but we
5
refuse to address
points.
it. Is
Like
what that means
5
to me.
points.
Yeah. Oh, also the enhancements for Adeptus
15,
Omnissiah
10.
and Master of Machine War both went up, I think, 10 points, making them 30 and 35 points now in
The lethal's aura.
Stayed
I don't
40.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is bananas, by the way.
It was already a
But
very expensive enhancement, but yeah, I probably
sure.
would have hit Tech Marines 10 points in that detachment as well.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that would have probably been. Yeah, I get it. There's a degree of if you make these too expensive, we're just going to play the one that has the stubber for 15 points less, right? You have to leave them like
Yeah, but that
reasonably
changes.
compelling.
That's a
But
big
it
change.
is, but it doesn't change a ton. It's a big change, but it's not a big change relatively. Now,
It's more than a change. It's a bigger change than making them fucking 5 points more.
yeah,
Because that is basically nothing.
yep. I think the main change you'll see with Black Templar's Ironstorm is you won't play Crusaders anymore. If you want that kind of profile, you might just play a tactical squad and split it in two, or you might just not bother and you'll just bring more tanks. None of the Dark Angel changes do shit. Death Company doesn't change anything. You'll tweak the list around to fit in exactly the same Death Company you were already playing, because if you were playing Death Company, you already wanted them, and going up 20 points will not change that data sheet in the slightest. It remains incredible. The Lion at 300 actually almost starts to look interesting until you remember that he doesn't do anything, and then
Yeah,
you're like, oh
thank
no,
you.
I'm gonna take anything else.
Like, oh, well.
And this change here, jump packs, you should probably start looking at reasons to not play 15 in pretty much any Space Marine list. That data sheet is very efficient for the points. It does a lot of stuff. It's fast. It scores. It does mortal wounds. It has grenade. It takes oath well.
It's very good.
Just play them. You know, I would start with 2 squads and be looking for a reason for a third. If you're already playing 2 scout squads, you know, like consider upgrading one of them to these guys. Like you don't need that many scouts. Scouts are kind of terrible all of the time. Play a sort of some jump packs and go and do things. They're pretty awesome. If you're playing Sons of Sanguinius or Gladius, yes, play 3 squads. Just do it.
Agreed. I will live till the day I can put the new Mephiston on the model on the table without trolling. It
I
is
put him on
not
the
this
table
day,
in
though.
8th edition a couple of times, and he was pretty good. Back when he was like a backup librarian dreadnought for when your librarian dreadnought went in and died after killing 5 centurions.
I maybe have done that twice, but it was still
Yeah.
kind of trolling, though.
Yeah, he wasn't as good, but he was kind
I
of fun
hate the
and
fact that
useful.
Sanguinary Guard have received their second buff in terms of points and are still pure ass.
Yeah.
I hate the fact that Dante didn't went down.
Why is Dante damaged too? Dante and
Fuck
Astra being
me.
damaged too is an insult to the
It
data sheets
is.
and
It
the models
is.
that they have.
I am very bewildered by the fact that the foot sanguinary priest went up then.
Yes, I don't
Foot
understand that
one?
at all.
Like I get the
I didn't
the
even know
jump
there was a
one.
foot. I didn't even know there was a foot one.
See,
I don't know
that's
what
what I
data
mean.
sheet he attaches to at all.
I, holy shit! What?
Vindicators
Why?
at 175. I don't think make it in Ironstorm. That data sheet is still like you really need the Chaos Space Marine buff of suite of buffs to make that data sheet really work. It's not really the Marine stuff that it's missing, I don't think. You know, Abaddon rerolls, lethal hits, sustained hits are the things that data sheet wants. And you can get that a little bit in Ironstorm, but it doesn't make them independently powerful. And that's most what Ironstorm is looking for, is independently powerful data sheets, because you want to be using all your buffs on like Reapers and things like that instead.
Yeah, I
So
like them in
I
Ironstorm
think
actually.
it's interesting
I
enough.
think
Like we could run a couple, but I don't know if I love them.
to be seen, of course,
Yeah.
but I like the fact that they are a way more durable alternative. It makes a genuine difference if you suddenly have a T11 2-up save tank that also receives AOC and shit. So I
That's fair.
do think that there is a niche for them in
That's
builds.
fair. I think the biggest problem is that they're still more expensive than all the Gladiator variants, even with the points drop. They don't
Absolutely.
become like they're still not cheaper than a Lancer. They're still not cheaper than a Reaper, which makes it a little bit like, are
Mhm.
you sure?
Yeah.
All right.
But I do think they are an
Sorry,
option
go
now.
for it. I think they were an option. I think there was a real secret of Irons or no. Pick your favorite 10 Space Marine tanks and shuffle them in a bag and put the 4 that fall out in a list, and you'll have a good Ironstorm list. It's not that complicated.
Mhm.
Like you can micro min max for meta as much as you want. It's really just play 10
Another
tanks
one,
and you'll be fine.
quick one. Really? Are we fixing eliminators by points changes? Not just FAQ it in any way?
Yeah,
Errata?
look, why don't
Anything?
they should just give the
Points?
Impulsor a war gear option that is stick 8 las cannons to it. And
Points? What the fuck? This is just the wrong way to do that, by the way.
I think it's hilarious.
It's so wrong.
Look, they will fix firing deck in 11th edition.
That is outrageous.
Yeah. Okay, Tau, no changes. Tau
That
are
was
getting
another
a
thing.
Militarum field manual update with the book when it comes out in a couple of weeks. So
Yep.
nothing to worry about here, nothing to see. We are almost done. We have 3 more armies. We have 1,000 Suns. We have 15 points off of Scarabacle Terminators for per 5. 1,000 Suns Cultist down 5 per 10. 1,000 Suns Demon Prince down 10. Demon Prince with Wings down 15. Hellbrute down 15. Mauler Fiend down 15. Vindicator down 15. And Arcane Vortex, which is the enhancement that gives +1 to strength and damage, went up 10 points.
Crazy.
It's
fucking insane.
So baffling to me that this army received nothing.
No. It got buffed.
Almost nothing. It got
5 points on cultists is nuts. If you asked me what was the one thing that you can quite safely nerf in Thousand Suns without like destroying the army itself, it would be, I don't know, fucking nerf cultists, right? Just put them up 5-10 points, and suddenly the army is like lighter on the table. It doesn't move block as much. It needs to play even more KG stuff like this. The cultists are like one of the biggest offenders in this army currently because of the move block.
Because they have
ability.
that
Scout and the move block and double move. It's very fucking good. And like them going down seems baffling to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. Someone's also saying I think Lord of Forbidden Lore.
Lord of Forbidden Lore also went up. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think this makes Thousand Suns bad, or even like I don't think it even makes them significantly better. Ultimately, you're going to lose like 10 points on your list, right? Because you're going to take a unit or two of cultists, and your enhancement's going to go up, and you're going to like change a character down to the downgrade version, or change his Angkor squad to a cultist squad.
Sure.
And that's net will result in the army being basically the same.
Like, I think Demon Princes are at least worth experimenting with.
Yeah,
now,
they
which I
like. We've definitely seen both of them showing up. I think anything that encourages you to play stuff that isn't just Cabal Point Factory or Move Block in Thousand Suns is a good thing. The fact that there is a compelling reason to play a character that generates the same as half the points of him is interesting and cool. If it gives you a different place to put Umberlefic Crystal or Arcane Vortex or whatever, right? You're still going to run it on a Flamer guy because we're all not psychopaths, but
yep. I think the problem over here is like Thousand Suns are very expensive in terms of points. You are not putting a lot of stuff on the table currently.
Nope. Magnus and 30 Tactical Marines.
Exactly. And like that's a still difficult army to pilot. It does rough things to people all of the time, especially when piloted by Liam, of course. And it's kind of not fixable by points because them just going up on things like Rubric Marines or the characters still kind of would make the army almost unplayable in terms of how many things you are putting on the table. But the end result, I think, is going to be a meta that has a Thousand Suns problem, straight up.
I think guards is going to be fine because there are just not that many good Thousand Suns players, and
yeah,
sure, is going to be a goddamn mess.
Because guard has just gotten nerfed significantly, as we've discussed, and that was one of the best answers to that army. And now you've got a problem.
Yep, I think the best Thousand Suns players in the world are going to win most of the tournaments for a little bit because they match up very well into Necrons, and that genuinely is a problem. Now, there is a world where Orks is a difficult matchup because Thousand Suns traditionally struggle with strong pressure, and there is a world where the Tau Codex is pretty good into them that results in a difficult time for them. There's also things like, Genestealer cults coming back onto the scene is traditionally pretty good into Thousand Suns and some things like that. So there's a world where maybe this doesn't pan out based on meta considerations, but I don't think it's the one that we live in. Yeah. I think we're going to be in a world where Infernal Masters are going to be ruling the top tables for a little bit, but we'll still have a pretty reasonable, like fairly low win rate in tournaments because there will be a
In
lot of
terms
people
of
picking them up and not doing
general
that great.
meta, like singles meta, the world meta, I think Thousand Suns are fine to be the best army in the game because most people are not going to experience being absolutely demolished by one of the best people in the world. Just
That's
destroying
also
them.
true, and probably
So
fine.
this
Probably
is
fine.
a kind of like the best army to be completely broken in the terms.
It's like this or Genestealer cults, right? Armies that nobody plays, and the people who play it are just bandwagon it, just get it wrong, right?
Yep.
They're the kinds of armies
It's
that, when they're the best, it's usually kind of fine because it's like
exactly.
1% of 1% of players doing well with them.
Mhm.
But such is life. Okay. Tyranids. Now, we recently went through our meta ranking tier list, and Tyranids ranked as the worst non-marine variant army in the game right now in terms of singles play. And these changes are not going to fix that. They are going to give you a couple of interesting build options and might give you a bit of diversity. There is an assimilation swarm list that gets kind of interesting off of some of the changes. But let's run through what they are, and then I'll complain about them. So we have Barbgaunts down 5, reverting an earlier points change. They got a rules update with the codex that prevented them from split firing and slowing everything. So they're definitely they're a lot worse than they are, and they're fine. They're nuked their points. The Gargoyles went up 5, which frankly, it's annoying to be an army with a terrible win rate getting a nerf, but Gargoyles are genuinely a terrible data sheet for the game and result in some of the least healthy play patterns that I have ever seen outside of an Eldar game.
Mhm.
Getting trapped in your deployment zone by a Gargoyle squad that is potentially infinitely regenerating, or honestly just going second against 20 of them in general, is one of the most upsetting experiences you will play for a lot of armies, and
They're
it's
in
the right kind of
jail.
thing to hit.
Let's go.
Yes. I mean, Gargoyles have been doing it for decades. I don't think it's new.
True.
Okay. Hive Guard down 10. Shot cannon variants, genuinely kind of interesting. It's a decent gun. Lictor down 5, still doesn't have an invulnerable save. The Psychophage came down 30 points. Now,
That's a lot of
it's
points.
a lot of points. Now, it was insulting that it was the same point as the Horror Specs before, and it was 10 points cheaper than an X screen. It's now an interesting option as a maybe one of. It kicks out an aura of 6 up field paint, which is fairly low impact as things go. But it itself is a beefy model with OC3 and toughness 10 and a 5, or toughness 9, 10 wounds, and a 5 up field paint. It's stats that walk around pretty well and stand places just fine. In Assimilation Swarm, it's kind of interesting because that detachment lives or dies by its healing, and having 1 or 2 wounds saved by a 6 up field pain results in more to heal and more value on that heal. And I think that detachment suddenly has some compelling options with some of the future changes. We have the Swarm Lord coming down 30 points. We have the Tyranid Warriors with melee bioweapons coming down 10. Tyranid Warriors with ranged bioweapons coming down 5. Tyrant Guard coming down 10. And Zoanthropes coming down 10. Now, it is nice that Tyrant Guard are finally cheaper than Meganobs.
Oof. Ooh, yeah,
But
yeah.
for 2 attacks at 822 with Twin Links, I would like to hope they would be. Toughness 8 is a cool stat, but I don't know why they have a 3 up armor save. Do you know, does that upset you as well?
Yes, that's very bizarre, actually. Especially after the Terror of Ninth.
Yeah, their data sheet rule is they give a 5 up field paint to the character that's leading them. That not themselves, just the character that's leading them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I know. I
isn't it
remember when
glorious?
they were placed on the table for the first time in 10th edition, and I was like, what the fuck has happened to you boys?
Yeah. I think they're
That's such a
like,
change.
so again, Assimilation Swarm really likes a lot of these changes. There are some really good enhancements for Tyranid Warriors where you can bring 2 models back a turn with Defeat the Swarm ability. So if you can keep that squad alive, it can do some annoying reanimation shenanigans. Same thing with Zoanthropes and Tyrant Guard. They are the kinds of models that are good to bring back with Feed the Swarm, especially
Mhm.
when you can do it for a CP with a stratagem. And if you're bringing the Swarm Lord and he's handing out the increased CP by 1 for your opponent and gaining a CP for a turn yourself, he's kind of like Leontis, except he hits things like a Meganob.
I hate what this has turned into. This
I'm
is the
sorry.
world we live in
I'll
now.
stop. I'll stop doing it. The Swarmlord is fine in combat, aggressively okay, I think is the technical term. But at 240 points, he is about as cheap as a Hive Tyrant. And if you're playing a detachment that doesn't have great battle tactics, just gaining a CP every turn instead is probably going to be better, especially if you're not leaning particularly heavily on the assault. And Vect is just a good ability to have in your back pocket for things like Armoric Attempt and Mercy's Weakness and all like that kind of general scope. So I think there is probably an Assimilation Swarm build that comes out of this. I think Vanguard Onslaught gets an interesting direction to go with like a 6 Zoanthrope squad being like bad Centurions in that detachment. You can pick them up and drop them every turn and fire 6 las cannon shots. And outside of that, not a ton changes. You might try to squeeze a Psychophage into like an invasion fleet list now as just a stat ball, but that list is already very tight on points and has a feel no pain on command from stratagems anyway. It becomes very very variable. I don't think this is enough to make Tyranids like particularly a strong army. I think that army kind of needs rules changes again. I would probably start looking at something like giving Shadow and the Warp like an aura range of reducing leadership or something like that to try and give some more reliability to the battle shock. But battle shock is an inherently very frustrating mechanic to be on the receiving end of. Like feeling like your units just don't get to do their thing and you don't get to play your game is almost a lot worse than just losing the unit wholesale. So I think there's definitely something that needs to happen with Tyranids that isn't just points buffs because they're already very cheap. They just kind of don't do anything. And not doing anything aggressive at your opponent a bunch is kind of a shame. And then the other side of it is when they are too cheap, like in Unending Swarm, they just result in your opponent having the most miserable game of all time. Because you're just feeling like you're playing into Tyranids. And when Tyranids work, it's frustrating. When you play against an invasion fleet and they're just, you're in your deployment zone, you're in your deployment zone, you're in your deployment zone, I'm in the midfield, I've scored points, oh, you can't deal with my Biovore, you lose the game now. That's not particularly enjoyable to play against, especially while you're battle shocked the entire way down and not interacting. So I think there's mechanical changes needed for Tyranids at the core. I don't think the army works the way it's designed to, and the way that it's designed to work isn't fun for either side because it's so frustrating based on battle shock tests.
Okay, I've got the most polished take of all time. I think Tyranids are the best army with the worst win rate currently.
Go for it.
Because I have seen so many different Tyranids builds just working. And yes, I am a complete team environment nut, and all I do is do teams. But I have seen people do well with everything between Endless Swarms, Vanguard onslaughts, with invasion fleets, that I actually Tyranids being so bad as they are currently is the wildest thing to me in terms of because I can obviously see the stats. I can see how bad they are doing currently all over the world, and this is unexplainable to me. This army, I get that there are significant problems with it. I just cannot understand why they are just the worst army in many regards in terms of
most events
statistics.
play Purge the Foe.
Yeah, sure, but fucking Drukhari.
Yeah, and look how well they're doing.
I don't know. I mean, better, which is the wildest thing to me.
I think genuinely a lot of it is Tyranids have quite polarizing matchup spreads, which is very easy to protect in teams, but not amazing.
Which is also, I would get that, but I so much disagree with that after seeing their games. I have seen people do stupid fucking things to all kind of builds and all kind of meta shenanigans.
Maybe people just need to get better against playing at Tyranids in Poland, and it's a skill issue on everybody else's half.
Yeah, but when they bring them to Alpine, it still fucking works. So what about that?
Did they hit into Alpine? I didn't remember seeing them on the podium.
Sure, but 6th place with no losses into things like fucking Thousand Suns, kind of good still.
Fair enough.
Like legitimately,
I think Tyranids, if Tyranids were good, there would
cannot understand.
There are so many people who would love to be playing Tyranids right now in singles tournaments that just aren't, and there's a reason for that. I think.
Yeah. Like 100%. Like
it
just don't fucking lie.
It doesn't seem to work.
I am bewildered by
We have one and a bit more. World Eaters. I think World Eaters were in a completely fine place coming into this data slate, and that's mostly because I have big play with Anthony privilege. And we are seeing the following. We have Jackals coming down 5, Corn Berserkers coming down 10 per 5, Hellbrute coming down 10, the Mauler Fiend coming down 15, and Terminators coming down 10. The Terminators still don't have a character that attaches to them, which is wild.
The best.
And otherwise,
I love the fact that not a single world leader ever in history has been like a Terminator has been good enough to get promoted to a Lord. I love that.
No, all the ones that would become all the Terminator characters or Terminators that would do cool things just immediately become Demon Princes.
That
and
makes
then they
sense.
get handed
Or
the helm.
they get
Yeah.
bonded to a juggernaut and just
Yeah, and they get told go hang out
get
with the jackals in late 2023.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I think World Eater changes, like, you might make an argument that there's something in a more Khorne Berserker focused build. Anthony is talking about playing his same list, but with the points drops and playing a 1955 point list because there is nothing he wants to change. And I think that that's the funniest shit I've ever heard.
This man cannot be stopped.
It's
In
like
terms of
I could cut the
fucking
berserker, like I could cut the berserker glaive for a squad of jackals, but that's not better. So
okay. Zerg's coming down 10 is kind of strange to me, legitimately.
So compare them to Plague Marines, and then remember that Plague Marines do everything they do but better, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, these guys are just nearly
They
characters.
just don't. Come on.
They just do.
They are definitely better, 100%, but they just don't do the same things. In no way.
No, I know, but I don't think the World Eaters the World Eaters list will change very much. It's a shame,
Nah.
but it is what it is.
I think actually I have seen a couple of builds being put together, and I think this change kind of makes a lot of things fit nicely together. So it almost seems to me like quality of life change in many regards.
Yeah, if you want to play something that's not exactly the build that Anthony plays, there are some cool things here. If you want to play exactly Anthony's build, your list doesn't change. And look, World Eaters players, if you're not just doing what Anthony does, and you're not also a WC level player, you're probably doing it wrong. And if you are a WC player, you are potentially still doing it wrong. Just do what he does. He's the OG. And I have to say that because he's stat check. All right, last one. Agents of the Imperium, Calidus up 10, Henchman up 10 per 4, and Inquisitor Carrier Draxus up 10. Broad level, the Calidus is such a stupid data sheet. There should be like 150 points because fuck that unit. It should not be in every list, and the fact that it is stupid. Kyria is only good in Custodes. Like, she's fine in like AdMech and a few things like that, but like she's only busted in Custodes. I don't think she really needed to change. Henchman up 10 makes sense. You will probably play Voidsman now because you get 5 models, but you get 8 wounds in a henchman squad because they're 2 wound models. But Voidsman you get 5 models, so you get a little bit of additional screening, and that's usually what's more important with those backfield units. So people will get to go and buy their 3rd different Imperial Agents infantry unit, and we've looped all the way back to the ones that were broken in 9th edition. So
correct.
Great. I mean, cool. We've looped back around. Next time it'll be exaction squads again.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually it'll just
Navy
keep going up until the point.
or some shit.
Yeah, it'll go up, and then Voidsman will eventually hit the point where they're 110 points, and you'll play Imperial Navy Breaches at 105, and it'll just nothing will ever change. All of these should be more expensive than Scouts. I think that's my baseline minimum. None of these should be cheaper than a Space Marine unit, because there should be no reason to ever play them over a unit in your own codex other than to fill points, and that shouldn't be a thing you have to do.
Yeah, but then Imperial Knights exist, and
give Imperial Knights their own data sheet. Give them sacristans, like the little dudes.
If that happens, I'm fine with them not existing.
Yep. Just
until then,
the data sheets shouldn't exist. They shouldn't be a thing that you're considering in your lists. They should
Assassins
be there
are cool though.
Yeah, Assassins are cool, but Assassins just the Averser is a dude on drugs with grenade keyword, and I kind of love him. Exactly. So I'm glad that he's like kind of compelling now for the Calidus. The Calidus is still an abomination of a data sheet.
Amen.
Lone Op shouldn't exist.
Amen.
Cool. That is the extent of the dataset reviews. So I think we've kind of made our thoughts clear as we go that this is a little bit tired, not wired, where a lot of things that we wanted to see aren't here. A lot of things that we wanted nerfed didn't get nerfed. A lot of things that we would have liked to see buffed for internal faction diversity didn't change. And there are some big hallmarks here of pending problems. We have a ton of questions that we're probably going to bypass here because it's getting very late for Pumbaa and he very graciously agreed to step on back on. So I think what we'll do instead is we'll spend 5-10 minutes talking about kind of big winners, big losers, and dark horses, and that'll hopefully cover most of what we want to. But hopefully, for anybody who asked any questions, and apologies to anybody who did in the Statue Discord or in the chat, we will try to get some of the best ones on the main show on Tuesday. So Pumbaa, who is your first big winner?
Necrons.
Okay.
Necrons or Orks. Okay. Between those two.
So Necrons
I
and
think
Orks is the
Necrons.
biggest winner. I'll chat out Thousand Suns then. I think
Yeah.
Thousand Suns lost one of their, generally tougher matchups in guard and didn't see anything meaningful on the points changes side that would make them weaker. There was a little bit of, you might side grade a character, whatever. But they lost a big predator. They remain incredibly powerful, and I'm sure we will see many, many good Thousand Suns players coming out of the woodwork and doing their best. Which is a shame that it's two factions that were already at the top of the metagame, probably staying at the top. Biggest losers.
Definitely Imperial Knights, 100%.
Just
And
because
then
no changes and already bad.
exactly, Custodes for basically the same reason, because it's hard to say. Like, they weren't bad beforehand, but the codex is bad, so it's a whole another problem coming up. Potentially Admech, but I'm not sure about that. And I think that's
I think of the changed factions, Guard probably gets the biggest direct hit to the list it was playing, but I think has the most room to change to something that's different but still powerful. Where I think of the other factions, Sisters is the most is going to play the same list but worse, with maybe a unit change here or there. But it will still be completely fine. I don't think Sisters are going to fall out of the meta anytime soon. Okay.
What it comes down to for me, this is kind of a nothing burger. Like, I expect there to be such little change in most armies.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited for Genestealer cults as my most improved. I think they have genuinely a decent amount, except Chaos Space Marines, but I'm not really counting them because the book is coming soon. I think Genestealer cults, of the ones that are likely to last a few months, I think this gives them genuinely some interesting gameplay options. I think there might be an MSU Grey Knight build that becomes kind of interesting. And
there's a lot of things to potentially try, but to be honest, unless they are kind of forced in some direction by the top of the meta revolving around them, I think most of the changes to current builds would be not because of those points, would be because something else pushed them to do those changes.
We're going to see, this is going to be a period of change due to external pressure. I think that's the big takeaway, right?
Exactly.
If your list is changing now, it's because you can get slightly there's an avenue of attack into the way that new court builds are built, right? That kind of thing. Or because you have to build it a certain way to have a strong play into Thousand Sons or Sons of Sanguinius. Or because the new Orc Codex or Tau Codex attack you in a way that you have to change your list for. And that'll be why lists change now, not because... And then there are a couple of armies that might see a new build. I think the ones that we're most likely to see new builds out of, based on this, for events in the short term, we will probably see a different variation of the guard build that leans more onto maybe it's Hull Spam, maybe it's Attilan Rough Riders, something in that direction. We might see something AdMech shaped come out of the woodwork, just with generally being very good at scoring. I think there is definitely an MSU CSM build that we'll see probably doing pretty well. I'm sure it'll win a bunch of majors in Germany, just like the current book has. And then I think you might see Drukhari and Genestealer cults, just the same builds, but with a bit more stuff or with a bit better matchups, come out of the woodwork. And then Assimilation Swarm Tyranids, I think, is the last one that I really think. I think that build is genuinely probably about as good as Invasion Fleet and Unending Swarm. Whether that holds up in singles play or team play, we'll find out. All I know is Eric Lathers is on a 115 game win streak in Australia with Tyranids right now across tournaments, and we'll see if
that's what I'm saying. Y'all trolling with Tyranids.
I know. I don't understand.
He's the man. He's the legend.
I have been speaking to Eric a little bit recently. We're gonna try and get him on the show soon, or at least on a bonus.
I would love that.
To talk Tyranids. So I will be doing my best to try to decipher the Tyranid metagame for everybody. It's going to be interesting. Maybe there's a world where Vanguard Marines come out of the woodwork with the loan up characters, and because that list has never been bad, but only Lennon's good at playing it, and one other dude.
Things that's not going to happen for 500, please.
Yeah, no, nobody's good enough at playing Terror. Nobody's good enough at playing that list except Lennon.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's all I've got. I want to give a massive shout out to Pumba for joining us at super short notice.
No problem.
At 2 a.m. in Poland. So thank you so much for being with us, Pumba, and enjoy whatever you're doing on the weekend.
To be
thank
able
you so
to
much,
join.
everybody, for being with us. We have had over 150 people, which is more than the points cost of 5 mega knobs. Sitting watching the show.
This meme is going to stick, by the way. I can feel that.
Yeah, no. Look, 30 centimeters. That's a whole mega knob of points of centimeters.
That is definitely
Um,
sticking.
yeah. Just did you fail your 4 Feel No Pain to not take emotional damage of
Oh
the
my
Scottish
god,
mega
it's
knob?
so many memes. The wave.
So
Ah,
I
rough.
am not doing plugs
Rough
because
going.
this is a bonus content and you can't make me. There is stuff in the
Hey.
description that I am presuming somebody else filled out because I didn't do it. I hope everybody's had a fantastic time. Check out all the sponsors and all that good stuff. We'll be back for the live show Tuesday at 11 p.m. UK to talk all things. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of data slate content from the other creators. Pumba, do you want to plug into the Matrix very briefly? When's your next episode? Mostly.
Most likely this Wednesday, not confirmed yet, because we need to find something to talk about, or just analyzing the team's
There's
meta.
a
But
there's a 100-player team event in Australia this weekend.
probably gonna tackle that then. But we need to also establish some boundaries because I have received news that Team England has officially shut down.
Oh, anti-Tyranids
Exactly.
tech. Yeah.
They have been gone into stealth sneaky mode before WTC fucking
Imagine having a
3 months
mode.
in advance or something, or
There's
even
also Battle for
more.
Salvation teams this weekend, where
Cool,
there is
cool,
a
cool.
stat check team. So there'll be a bunch of team events this weekend that you can talk about in retrospect. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us. Have a fantastic weekend. If you're at a tournament, good luck. If you're at the practice day with me, Bruce, I saw you watching earlier. Don't play Sisters, play Death Guard. All right,
Do play
guys.
Death Guard.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so
Catch you all
much.
later. Hey, it's a tier
See you.
list.
See ya.
Goodbye.